Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Politically Correct Ghana lesson 356, and today the 25th of March 2024. The title for today's discussion is Part 2 of Posthumous Awards and Posthumous Punishment for Slavery. And we want to discuss the Ashanti Empire's slavery enterprise. Ashanti Empire slavery enterprise. And sometime the first Ashanti king, in the person of Osei Tutu the first, from 1670, the year 1670 to about 1717 thereabout, he built the Ashanti kingdom around Akans, and predominantly his main act was state act or state enterprise of slavery. All his enterprise was of slavery and a bit of gold, because at the time gold was needed, but slaves were more needed. So he was involved. He organized he and his people, his spiritual leader or advisor, being Okonfanoche, to terrorize people, kidnap children, kidnap vulnerable people, kidnap strong people, kidnap men, kidnap women, kidnap any other enemy that he could find. He would kidnap. They would terrorize them. They would just pounce on them like bandits in their towns and kidnap them. He sells those who is kidnapped under the guise of a war to the Europeans as slaves. Then they make their guns and gunpowder and good money. That is how he built, that is how Osei Tutu the first built the Ashanti kingdom. So Ashanti kingdom was built on an illegality, and that is slavery, of which we expect that the Ashantehene of today should reflect and reflect again and come clear with an apology. Apologize to the world that his forebears were involved in slavery. He's not the only one. We're going to go through a plethora of them. The Ashanti kingdom, the Ashanti kings that got involved in slavery as their main source of what? Building their kingdom. And that was so bad. Osei Tutu the first and his gang were nothing more than gangsters. Even if their gangsters is better, they were stealers, they were terrorists, they were kidnappers, they were bandits, they were slave traders, middlemen of slave traders. That's how they made their wealth. And that is so disgusting, despicable, that decent Ashantis must begin to apologize to the African Americans, Afro-Brazilians, and the Caribbeans, Africans in the Caribbean and other places, because they never sold any Ashanti. Take note, Osei Tutu the first never sold any Ashanti. All that he sold were as slaves. He never sold any Ashanti into slavery. All that he sold into slavery were those they pounced on, they kidnapped, they terrorized, took towns. Asymmetric war, that's what they did. Unconventional war is what they did. So barbaric. And that's what Osei Tutu the first, way back in 1670 to 1770, where he formed he was the first Ashanti king. That is how he built that kingdom, based on slave enterprise. And so it is so unethical. You cannot build an enterprise on slavery. That even brings to mind that, so then he has to be named and shamed. And it's written in history anyway. Written history has it. But it's the analysis that's the problem. We have to analyze it, realign history in its analytic form, such that we do not end up praising the vice promoters or the vice practitioners, those who practice vice, like Osei Tutu the first, who was involved in slavery to set up his kingdom, kidnapping, banditry, stealing as a stealer, slave trader, to build a kingdom. And that is morally or ethically not right. We cannot praise such a person. Anywhere that is named Osei Tutu the first must be scrapped off in Ghana. Any item or anything that is named Osei Tutu the first must be scrapped off. So it reminds me of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Are we saying that the philosophers in Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology are not aware of this history? They do know. So they would have to tell their chancellor, who is Osei Tutu II, to apologize for such a heinous crime that his forebears did. Because the name is Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Kwame Nkrumah fought for African liberation, but His great-grandparents, the chancellor of the university, his great-grandparents were slave traders. That is how they made that kingdom. That's the enterprise they got involved in. Asante Empire slave trading enterprise. So bad. And then there's one person or two people that would have to mention to praise this week. And let's mention Toussaint Louverture, the first independent president or leader of Haiti. He's an African. He fought with the French and he defeated them. And he gave the Africans who were slaves that liberation in Haiti. And since then, Haiti has been independent. Since 1818 thereabout, they have been liberated. Okay, the second person is a Ghanaian who we call Ottobah Cugoano from Ajumako. He was taken into slavery at the age of 13 years. At the age of 13 years, Cugoano was taken into slavery. You can imagine how they moved him and others from Ajumako all the way to Cape Coast on bare feet at 13 years. That's child trafficking. So he wrote a book. He later became John Stuart in England, and he wrote a book to that effect that called for total abolition of slavery, and that went to Parliament or the House of Commons in UK and led to the final abolition in 1833 of slavery. The name is H. Kwame Afaglo. Let's name and shame those bad people, evildoers, unethical people in our society, and let history realign to promote or uphold virtue promoters, virtue doers like Toussaint Louverture, who deserves an award, a posthumous award. Then, of course, Kwabena Ottobah Cugoano. For those African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans, and other Africans of other descents of different countries or different continents who think that they are Ashantis, rethink it's not true. Because Osei Tutu the first, never, it was a principle that they should never sell any Ashanti, but they should sell those who are non-Ashantis that they have kidnapped or gone to asymmetric war with them and taken them as slaves and sold to the Europeans. Those are your forebears. So do not come to Menshia to bow to that or to Ashantehene today. Ashantehene, don't bow to him, because if you do that, your forebears will feel very sad for you. You are bowing to the great-grandchild of your great-grandpa's capturer. That is not appropriate.